Hi everyone, Go Rocket Baby here, and today we're going to be talking about 2Slimey's High Anxiety. So, High Anxiety is 2Slimey's debut studio album released on November 14th, 2025. Now this one follows up on his mixtape from last November, Show Me, with 2 S's at the start. This project features Isaiah Teaching and Babytron. Now, since his breakout single last year, Shrimp, which it feels like damn near every single underground promo page on Twitter posted. Too Slimey has stuck around and he's kept on dropping, and now we've made it here. The music is nonsense, and I feel like you have to be aware of that while listening to it. There's no substance to it, and it really is just hype noise to turn up to, and that's perfectly valid. You know, there's nothing wrong with the music being just that. But this album has a very consistent, very blown out sound, and too much for its own good. Honestly, a lot of the lyrics here are incoherent, and the part that you can make out are usually the parts where they're repeating the same lines over and over and over again, but it feels like less rapping and more sound effect stammering. However, I do have to give credit. All the producers snapped on here. I'm giving a special shout out to Vior 5K, who produced the vast majority of this album. The production is mostly super crazy synths with comically blown out bass, to the point that it literally feels like I'm being trolled while listening to this. I feel like they're laughing alongside us. However, with the bass as ridiculous as it is, I can only imagine listening to this album in the car is going to be a really crazy experience. However, I do think there needs to be a little more variance than what's presented here, as it really wants to hold my attention. This album is 15 tracks long, and a lot of these 15 tracks sound really samey. A couple of these songs stood out mainly because I'd heard snippets of them already, like on Instagram and stuff like that, but at least on first listen, it's very hard to tell a lot of these songs apart from one another. A lot of these songs do know not to pass the 2-minute mark, but there are a few songs on here that are damn near 3 minutes long when they really have no right to be. I honestly feel like this album could have benefited from being like 5 or 6 songs shorter. However, some of the most interesting moments on here are the features, so let's talk about them. A race car featuring Babytron. First of all, it is 2Slimey featuring Babytron that is just as ridiculous as it sounds, but on here, Babytron sound like he did not give a single fuck about this. This could have been an Instagram voice message that they just put over. Now, she was trying a little harder than that, but the mixing, there's barely any mixing on it to even try to make it sound consistent with what 2Slimey is already doing on this track. Babytron definitely got paid for this, but how much, I really am curious. There's a little bit of auto-tune on it, but it doesn't do enough to save this really lazy Babytron feature, and it somehow leads to 2Slimey outdoing Babytron, which is ridiculous. There's no world in which this should happen, and yet here it is. And for our next and final feature on here, there's Isaiah Teasy on In Her Jaw. Now on this beat, Isaiah is going really hard over the beat. Honestly, I really like his part on the song. You know, it is the highlight of the song, but the one issue I have with this is it's a really short feature. Like, if he was on here for a little longer, you know, could you give me like 16 more? Could you give me 8 more bars? Could you give me 16 more bars? Can you give me a little more, please? Or, you know, just have Isaiah's part as the hook or something? Like, I just wish there was more of him. And another notable collab on here, though it's not with another rapper, is Let's Go Home, which is produced solely by OK. And this sees 2Slimey getting over an OK beat. And honestly, this OK beat is really good, and 2Slimey does quite well on it. OK, he's very good at adapting to certain sounds for certain artists. I think a really good example of this is his work with Steak Mink, where, you know, this is not the same OK that did Jump Out or was producing for Clock 40, but it is still an OK that is very capable of making very good beats. And this beat is really good. Could someone other than 2Slimey have done better on this beat? No, probably. Regardless though, I do think it is a good song. So my favorite songs on here were 3 'Em Out, Link Up, Let's Go Home, and Meet. When it comes to this album, my expectations were pretty neutral, as honestly, other than the aforementioned Shrimp, I'm not too familiar with any other 2Slimey songs. Like, when I have tuned into a new release, yes, they've had that 2Slimey sound, but they haven't done anything for me. Like, I've heard some of his singles as he's dropped them, not necessarily once for this album, but you know, every now and then I'll tune into a new 2Slimey song, and yep, it's definitely 2Slimey. It doesn't really stick with me, you know, like, oh my god, funny in the moment, but it doesn't have that EO1 quality that I think Shrimp had. And it has me questioning whether it was even really an earworm effect or if it was spammed so much on these promo pages that it actually just got stuck in my head. What I will have to say though is that Shrimp is better than any song on here. But for Shrimp, I do have to give 2Slimey his credit because people were making fun of that song when it came out. I thought it was high, but people were making fun of that song. They talking about like this shit is garbage. But nowadays, the underground sound is a lot closer to what 2Slimey was doing on Shrimp. 2Slimey was low-key ahead of the curve. I mean, look at Osamu-san's Psychotic, to a lesser extent, Shay's Rest in Bass, and to the easiest comparison, Bleod. Now, I'm gonna elaborate on this point because I think it's really easy to draw a lot of parallels between 2Slimey's High Anxiety and Bleod's recently released Rascal 51. But while Rascal 51 does have a lot of the same problems and a very similar sound, mainly the repetitiveness, it faces these issues to a lesser extent. And honestly, I just like the average Blood song on that album versus the average 2Slimey song on this album. However, with these two albums, I feel like we're really reaching the apex, the furthest reaches of how this specific sound can go. I feel like we're reaching as ridiculous as it's going to get, but of course, it can always go further, and I'm sure it will go further, and I'm excited to see how that's done because I can't even begin to imagine where do we go from here. In the meantime though, we have this 2Slimey, High Anxiety. So, what do you guys think of High Anxiety? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know if there's any albums or artists that you want me to check out. I will be reading all the comments, so please do leave feedback if you have any. But until next time, take care everyone.